Hey, welcome to the Wisdom and Knowledge broadcast. I'm your host, Jason Hevner, and we're here to talk about people, personalities, relationships, all that good stuff. And in particular today, we're going to talk about weird people. Do you know any weird people in your life? I know, don't get you started, there's a lot of them. Well, we're not talking about just any type of weird person. We're talking about a particular type of weird person. One where when you see them coming down the street, you don't necessarily cross the street, but you're like, I gotta cross the street. I gotta get to this side. Or you're going down the grocery aisle, right? And you're like, oh, there they are. I gotta sneak away. Why? Because they're weird. I don't know how to deal with them. Well, sometimes that can be environmental. Sure. Maybe they grew up and they weren't socialized well, or maybe they are some sort of crazy recluse that this is their one time out a month and they're going to talk to you or something. Maybe they don't talk to you and that makes you feel awkward. So we're going to talk about personality and how sometimes weird people are just it's just a personality difference. But before we do that, before we start talking about that, I need to make a quick apology, because in the last video, episode 6, I believe it was, I'm saying S and N like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm pointing. I watched the video, and you're not supposed to watch your own videos too much. But anyways, I was watching my own video, and I'm pointing at, for instance, sensory, but I'm saying intuition or vice versa. So I apologize. I need to be a little more careful about when I'm speaking, not to be too sloppy. And I saw in that last video, I was like, so sloppy. I need to be more precise and less loose. So I'm going to attempt to do that, which may cause me to pause from time to time, but hopefully it'll be for our own benefit and for accuracy. All right, let's get into it. So weird people, right? Weird people. Now, before I get started, for those of you who haven't seen it or need a refresher, remember that every person has each one of these functions. Okay, we call these a function, and it's the idea. Here's the group, and here's the individual, and objective is where the individual is trying to harmonize the group or align with the group. When you're trying to harmonize the group, you're trying to align yourself to the group and also bring the group into alignment. And then subjective is where you hear the group, but you're trying to distinguish yourself from the group. Some people say the tribe, right? You're trying to distinguish yourself. Okay, here's what the tribe's position is. What's my position? Here's what the tribe saw. What did I see? Okay, so subjective is about yourself, and objective is about other people. And according to this personality type theory, we have functions that are both, in each of these functions, there's an objective and subjective position that we're using them in. And you can see them. Let's move over one screen. And then we call them, like for instance, SE, SI, objective sensing, subjective sensing. And then these all take time, right? It takes time to think about your objective values and your subjective values, objective logic and subjective logic. It takes time. So you can't be doing all of these functions all at the same time. Although you have them at your disposal, you're going to prefer some for efficiency's sake. And my take on it is that we're designed this way. That so many people are right-handed. Is that? Oh, that's a tangent. Let's not get on a tangent. But the idea is right. People are right-handed or left-handed. It's not like you choose every day what dominant hand you're going to have. Once you find one that works for you, you just use it. So if you're left-handed and there's a pen on the table, most likely you pick it up with your left hand. And if you're right-handed, most likely you sign with your you have your signature with your right hand, and you do things with your right hand. It's right hand dominant. It doesn't mean that you favor it to the point of not using your left. You know, if you were like, well, I don't need my left hand, you can cut it off. No, of course not. You are very dependent upon it. So in these personality functions, we're dependent upon both, but we have one that we prefer. Okay, we prefer it, and when people prefer it, they usually get pretty good at it, especially if it's relative to the other functions. So somebody who's SE dominant, okay, is going to prefer, concrete facts, the way that objective sensing facts. So they don't like, for instance, they would tend to stay away from illustrations. Like, don't give me an illustration, tell me exactly what it is. Whereas the intuitive people, intuitive dominant people, might like illustrations. Oh, I'll say it this way, and then you can puzzle together the connections. And as dominant people are like, no thanks, just tell me, if you have a choice, just tell me the way it is, don't give me any puzzles. Okay, let's get on to weird people. Ready? Let's switch over here. All right, and here. Okay, so we have 16 types, and we're going to pick on the ENTJ today. The ENTJ. So that means they're intuitive dominant. By the way, there's thought out there that perhaps Napoleon was an ENTJ. And let's see, I have a couple of friends who are ENTJs. But let's look at them. Oh, actually, let's go back. Sorry. In relationship to other people. Okay. So here's the ENTJ. So he's got TE rationale. He's TE dominant. You can go back to the screens if you want to see what TE means. But so TE dominant, then subjective intuition, objective sensing, subjective values. This is the order in which we find the ENTJ. Now, if there's all these 16 different types, then there's expected compatibility issues. So that's what we find in the next screen here. So here's the ENTJ on the left in all these circumstances. And then we pair this ENTJ up to other personality types. So on the top here I have what would be theoretically one of the best match here on the right. The ENTJ paired up with an INTP. And then what we have over here, what is arguably the most difficult matchup. There is thought that ENTJ with ENTJ might actually be even more difficult because everything becomes a competitive thing. So it's like rationale against rationale, intuition against intuition. But let's stay with this idea for now. And there's different theories. If you have any comments or questions, we can talk about those. By the way, if you want to give me a like if you enjoy this content, I'd appreciate it. Okay, so the ENTJ here is paired up well with the INTP. Let's talk about why. Well, the ENTJ has TE rationale. So when they can talk, okay? They can talk well and a lot. And they can bring out a lot of, they're trying to synchronize the thinking of the group, not the values of the group. They're trying to synchronize the thinking of the group. What's the difference? They're trying to do and talk about what works. What works. In wisdom, we have two functions. We've got values and we've got logic. You bring those together and we get wisdom. Let's see if I have a picture of that. Here we go. Logic and wisdom. So what the TE rationale is trying to do is trying to harmonize for the group. Here we go. See right here. There he is. TE dominant. He's trying to harmonize with the group the logic. Okay? He's trying to harmonize it, and the logic that he's prefers to work with is intuition. So subjective intuition. If we go back over here, there he is. See the subjective intuition? Then he's got objective sensing, subjective value, subjective logic. Now I put a little shadow mark in here, and a lot of people talk about how the shadow is sort of like what you have to pause to think about. You know, as you're just going along your day, you're up in your top 4 functions, but then occasionally throughout the day you're like, oh wait, let me think about this. Do I actually agree with what I'm saying, or do I actually agree with these values that I'm holding? And you go to your conscience to kind of like argue your point to yourself. So the shadow kind of checks the upper side. But here's what's cool, okay? Here's what's cool. Look at this. When an ENTJ and an INTP are together, look at this shadow function down here. This is the TINESIFE. Well, that's the up in the daylight, as it were, of the INTP. That's what they're using constantly. And so an ENTJ and an INTP are like each other's consciences, and they don't have to work to get down there. They can just, the ENTJ can just chat about whatever is going on in their life, and then INTP can look at that and say, hey, is that logical? And it's an internal function, so they're kind of doing it silently. They're judging silently, but they're looking for logic. And the ENTJ, if they're a wise ENTJ, would appreciate the high level of logic being scrutinized. So they're not dealing on the value side, they're dealing on the logic. But wisdom needs logic and values, and the ENTJ is going to use, hopefully, wisdom. But it's down here, the other part, which is their subjective values. And when they get down here, as far as their interest goes, you know, their interest is more in what works, what's functional, what's practical. All right, but wisdom isn't just about what works. Wisdom isn't just about what's practical. It's also about what's right and what's good. And so you do have to use both of these functions. Well, the INTP there is judging logically everything the ENTJ is spitting out. And then when the ENTJ is thinking about their own values and seeing if what they're saying is lining up with their values, well, the INTP is more than happy to tell the ENTJ if it's harmony with the group. Is this going to bring harmony as far as values? But here's the thing: is they're going to do it with similar intensity. So where the ENTJ here is like, the ENTJ is sort of like, here's the rationale, here's my rationale. The INTP is going to judge the rationale. He's not going to judge the values yet. But after they've kind of worked it out and beat out the rationale, then they're going to say, okay, having beat it out and found it workable, this is going to work. Hey, let's go see if this is actually good. Let's go see if this actually aligns with our values. Well, then you come down here and it's like, okay, yeah, here we are working down here, and sure enough, it does or it doesn't, and they can work on this. But it's not like the INTP or the ENTJ are going to pound each other on it. I mean, they might. I don't know each individual, but their interest in it, and therefore the time they spend on it, is going to be significantly less. So here we have, as far as are people weird or not, right? The ENTJ is not going to think the INTP is weird. They're going to finally be somebody they've met that makes sense to them, because there's not a lot of INTPs that I've seen. That INTPs are few and far between, as has been my experience. And MBTI would say that they're not as common. So an ENTJ would certainly find this a prized relationship. Now, ISFP is a little more common. Let's look at what that interaction here might be. So let's assume, for the sake of discussion, these two folks are of the same age, similar backgrounds, similar growing up experiences. So by and large, they're contemporaries, peers, all that sort of thing. So the TE gets ready. He starts giving about what works. Here's what needs to happen in our company. Our company needs to do this, 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 this. Well, let's say the company is a company whose purpose is to preserve animals that are getting ready to become extinct. So this ENTJ has all of these reasons and ways to perform this. Well, when they talks to the ISFP has to go not to his first or her first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh function, but their eighth one down here. One that causes them, when the ENTJ is talking, to have to set aside, if we're going to compare these two, right? Here, he's not setting aside his values. He's actually staying in the logic. But here, the ISFP, the most treasured function right here, they're going to have to set it aside and go all the way down here to logic to respond at the level that the ENTJ wants to be responded to in. So he's going to say something like, and let's say we're going to save the whales, right? I've heard of that one. Save the whales. Well, to do that, we need to cut out all the shipping lines and only use rowboats. There we go, rowboats. Okay, and that'll cut down on people who won't do as much whaling. Okay, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry, it's ridiculous. I know, but that's what the ENTJ said. It's not what I said. It's what the ENTJ said. Don't look at me. But so the ENTJ has this bizarre plan. Okay, he's not going to get a logical response about, well, rowboats are ineffective for moving fuel oil across the. He's not going to stay on that. What he's going to get for a response is the values of families. Then this is what the ISFP might say. Well, then families who are across the ocean can't cross on a boat. We have to leave room for motorboats because families are going to not be able to get together. We want to save the whales, but think about the families, or think about this or that. And they're going to respond, basically what I'm trying to get to, the point here is that FI, according to the subjective values, the subjective values are going to be how they want to respond to the ENTJ's rationale. That's going to be difficult. If you can follow my silly story there, FI is going to have a hard time responding the way the ENTJ would prefer to be responded to. We can go all the way down the line. I'm not going to give examples for everything, but here in the next one, okay, let's skip rationale, all right? We're not getting along here, which is a huge red flag because this is where they feel most efficient, as does the ISFP. Right up here with the FI, they feel the most relaxed and comfortable dealing with this function. Well, we'll skip that. Let's go down to the NI. So NI, subjective. What is my future at this company based on my interaction? Let's talk about that. Okay, well, the ISFP says, let me just give you a good experience. I'll take you out to dinner. We'll have coffee. Just do some small talk. And the ENTJ is like, small talk? Why are we going to do small talk? NI, my future, thinking about my future. And so then there's a disconnect there. Basically, the ISFP doesn't have NE to offer choices to the ENTJ about their future. The ISFP would have to go into their conscience and say, well, this company might not be the place for you. Maybe there's other companies where your skills are better used. All right, so we can see that this is, compared to this relationship, the exact opposite. The functions that are the easiest for the ISFP to use are in direct contrast to the functions that are easiest for the ENTJ to use. Whew, whole lot of words there. So these are high contrast relationships. So do you think that this guy right here, the ISFP, who, by the way, is in, one more time, the ISFP right here, they're in this column here, and these two columns make up the predominant amount of the population. The S dominant people are far more common. So the intuitives are more like the left-handed folks, and the S dominant people are more like the right-handed folks, far more right-handed than left-handed. So this ISFP, essentially right-handed fella, might think that this one's not worth working with, because look, he's so out there in his logic, and it's all about him talking, and I can't even get a word in edgewise because his TE, he's got a rationale for everything, and every time I try to decide if it's good or bad, he doesn't want to talk about it. It's like, look, if you're an ENTJ and you're talking to an ISFP, you guys got to be patient. In like tremendously patient. Okay, let's move on. This is myself here, an ENFP, and here's an ENTJ. And here's what we got a little bit in common. We've got some green lines here. It's not a whole lot, but we've got some. My NE is just crazy, puzzling together intuitive thoughts, looking for patterns from the past. So SI, I use the past and develop patterns to predict what's going to happen in the future. That's the easiest state I can find my mind in when I'm at rest, is just making connections of what will happen based on what has happened. And ENTJs here, they're kind of like, well, I can kind of use that because they are subjective in their intuition. So as I talk to them about patterns in the world that I see, they can be like, that's helpful. I'll use that pattern in my life this way and that way. And then they start to tell me about all these this rationale that they have. And look at this. Way down here to almost my second to last function of logic. Really what I end up doing, and it's not a great match, but I'm aware of it, so I just be careful, is I try to compete with their TE. So they give some sort of reason, some sort of harmony of logic, and then I try with my third function down with my harmony of logic. And if we're peers and have similar backgrounds and all, they're just going to run circles around me. But if they're a young child and a ENTJ, well, my TE might surpass theirs because of experience and time. But by and large, if we're peers, their TE is going to run circles and basically be able to out-harmonize, in a logic sense, my TE. So we kind of miss there. And then on the SE experience, this is kind of okay because an ENTJ will say, I tell you what, let's go out for coffee and just talk about intuitive things. We'll puzzle things together. Well, I say, cool, that's a nice experience. I'd like to do that. Thanks. Yeah, I'll go with you for coffee. There's my SI down there, receiving good experience. And then in our shadows, my intuition, my subjective intuition is in my shadow function, and their extroverted intuition is also in their shadow function. So there's not really for both of us, it's in our shadows, so it's not as much a part of the conversation generally. Like we wouldn't prefer they wouldn't prefer to talk about NE, and I wouldn't prefer to talk about NI, though I may have to, but wouldn't prefer it. It's just not the flow state. All right, let's move on. ENTJ with an ISTP. Now there's 16 types, right? Including the ENTJ themselves. But, oops, sorry about that. Here we have a concrete ISTP. Think about this guy as like a mechanic, somebody who's, if we got Napoleon over here, we've got a mechanic over here who can fix engines, lumberjack. real rugged guy. Maybe he fixes HVAC, that sort of thing. And we have an ENTP over here. So here we go. Got a straight line right here. Look at this connection. Now there's some usefulness here because this guy's got rationale and he's got logic. Cool. I'm going to talk. You judge it. You refine it. I like it. Problem though, on the next two functions. See this? What's going to happen? The ENTJ is going to be giving rationale on what? The intuitive side of life and things that are intuitive to himself or herself. And then, having accomplished those two things, this third function is kind of like a playful function. The third function, and you see in people, are where they're just doing their best. You know, they're just kind of do their best. It's a child function. So, SE giving a good experience to the ISTP, they'll just do their best at it. But here's what's happening. After the logic of the ISTP has come out, they're not going to be basing it on the subjective intuition of the INTJ. They're going to be basing their logic on the objective sensing, on their own objective sensing and their subjective intuition. So they're going to have a hard time. They're going to want to be logically combating or interacting back and forth, having this exchange back and forth. But it's going to be hard if they're using concrete experiences when the ENTJ is trying to use intuitive dominant thoughts. Okay, weird, definitely weird. Now the intuitives, the left-handed folks, know that they're in the minority. Usually, not always, but usually, and that's the case. Usually they are in the minority. So they kind of know when they're working with ISTPs that there's a little bit of advantage because they've also puzzled this together. It's not to say that they're going to get along with them, it's just to say that they understand the dynamics. But the ISTP will more than likely think of the ENTJ as a little weird, a little hard to get along with because their heads are up in the clouds with their subjective NI, and they're not talking about real life. They're going to talk about theory and theoretical and the potential. And the ISTP is like, let's talk about real life. Let's not talk about theoretical because I can judge that logically. So, weird? Oh, totally weird, especially for the ISTP. You're a weird fella, ENTJ. Okay? So, I guess I'd like you to think about that. Think about that for where I want to go from here. Oh, so I found this. I don't know how to do this well. To do this in a good way. So this is. I'm kind of thinking of this broadcast as a teaching broadcast. I feel like it's going to be more teaching than entertainment for sure. Yeah. So here's a little entertainment, but I would like to teach through this entertainment. All right. This is going to be a situation where we have this fellow down here. He's probably an ENTJ, as a matter of fact, this white-haired fellow. And this is Get Smart. This is Agent 99 or whatever his name is. And he's going to be, well, let's just listen to the exchange and I'll pause it along the way.
Dementi, your demented plan will not work.
Okay, he says, Dementi, your demented plan, value statement, will not work, TE. So values, your demented plan, then, so that's either FE or FI, will not work, T. Okay? Now, I'm sorry, let's pause this music for a second, if we can. How do I pause it? There we go, right there. Okay, your demented plan will not work. Now, he's going to get ready to use just TE. He's not going to be using values. He's going to be using just TE. and he's going to be using TI logic.
Why not? Because at this very moment, this warehouse is being surrounded by 100 cops with Doberman pinchers. Would you believe it? 100 cops with Doberman pinchers.
I find that hard to believe.
Judgment. Okay? 100 cops with Doberman pinchers. Would you believe it? 100 cops with Doberman pinchers. TI. I find that hard to believe. Now, what happens? Think about it. Here he is, up here on the wall, chained up apparently. If Dr. Dementi believes that there's 100 cops out there with Doberman pinchers, what's going to happen? He's going to let him go. Or something. That's his expectation. And this is the value of TE. TE is effectual for harmony of logic to get something done. And in this case, it's humorous, right? At least I get a kick out of this all the time. Because he says so many times, would you believe this? Would you believe that? Because if you would believe it, then TE, the group harmony of logic, means let's do something about it. So here he is, he's going to say 100 cops with Doberman pinchers, but Dr. Dementi says, I find that hard to believe. TI, that's not logical.
Would you believe 10 security guards and a bloodhound?
See, a little more believable. 10 security guards. Okay, so he's demoted the police, and a bloodhound. He's demoted the dogs too. You know, if you didn't believe the first one, let's go ahead with the second one. I didn't change my actual logic, but I'm making it more believable. Would you believe that?
I don't think so.
How about a Boy Scout with rabies?
How about a Boy Scout with rabies, right? He keeps demoting the people. And what he's doing is he's giving TE, because once that's what the TE users know. Okay?
Mr. Smart, there is no force on Earth capable of stopping me.
All right, let's watch it one more time.
Dementi, your demented plan will not work.
Okay, values.
Why not?
Because at this very moment, this warehouse is being surrounded by 100 cops with Doberman pinchers. Would you believe it? 100 cops with Doberman pinchers.
I find that hard to believe.
Would you believe 10 security guards and a bloodhound?
I don't think so.
See? So you can watch this. I'll put a link in the description below to this, what I'm watching here. But that's and there's a few more you can see or you can find. When you see Get Smart giving his rationales, always think to yourself, that's TE. Because if the bad guys, Chaos or whoever, believes him, then we expect something to happen. Never does. It's always a funny ending, right? So when you're watching and listening for somebody's personality type, when they're trying to get you to believe something, they're using TE. When they're getting you to try to believe it. Now these guys up here, the ESTJ and the ENTJ, did I say that guy was an ENTJ? Strike that from the record. I don't think he was an ENTJ. I don't know. I don't want to get sidetracked with that. But anyway, the TE is basically getting the group to believe the logic. We're not dealing with the values when we believe their logic. We're believing the logic. I've had an ESTJ say to me, "Oh my goodness," he said things like, I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, but I don't believe him for a second. I know he could do this or that, but he's using TE. That's the point. And if I believe it, then it's effectual, right? So TE does not have to do with, TE does have to do with logic, but it's more about the group harmonizing for a result. Can I give you another illustration? And then we'll get back onto weird people, right? Think about it. You're driving down the road, okay? You're driving down the road and there's a speed limit sign. It says, if you're on Interstate 91 perhaps, if you're over here on the East Coast. Driving south on 91, and the speed limit says 65, okay? That's a TE function. And here's why it's TE. It might take me a minute to explain it, but let's listen to this explanation if you wish, or you can fast forward. TE, 65 miles an hour. What's happening is the group, or in this case the government, is pooling together information about vehicles, about people's reaction times. They're pooling together information, hopefully. Maybe they're not, but hopefully they are. And they're coming up with a rationale for a particular speed limit of 65. It doesn't mean it's the best speed. Perhaps 80 miles an hour is the perfect speed, or 76.5 miles per hour is the best speed. Like, theoretically, there is a ideal, perfect, true, perfect speed, okay? But in the absence of knowing what that true, perfect speed is, going down 91 or up 91, there is a TE rationale of 65. And because, well, in this case, the government just enforces it, but the idea is that if we all agree to it, then traffic will flow smoothly. This is going to hurt people if they, not hurt them, but like if you've got to get to a meeting, and so all the TI users, it's not a subjective speed limit, as we know, right? It's objective speed limit. We all have to do this 65 mile an hour thing, and it's objective. It doesn't mean it's right. Objective doesn't mean it's right. It just means that everybody's agreed to it. That's all it means. Subjective doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that one person is holding this view. Objective is a little more attached to the group, where the group is it's hard. Wouldn't you say it's harder to move a group's opinion than it is to move, well, an individual's opinion? Like, the individual can move themselves by new data, but that's an interesting thought, but I need to refine that more. So neither objective nor subjective are values, or logic are accurate, but TI is looking for accurate, TE is looking for harmony. They're not the same thing, but they're the TE is useful. So weird people, okay? Weird people. I'm a weird person. Who you tend to not get along with. Everybody has this mix up here, this X fun. You have somebody in your life. Well, I don't know if they're in your life, but there's personality types that are at odds with you to this degree, and there are people in your life that have this potential. It doesn't mean that their upbringing or their, so let's see, nature versus nurture, right? It doesn't mean that their nurture is compatible. Maybe they're holding fundamentally different beliefs or whatever. Maybe their highest regard is themselves or something that you disagree with. So you can still have conflict, but the communication and the interaction style, the style of interaction will be one of free-flowing, or it's just going to be each person's going to have to go to their conscience and really dig hard to participate in a wholesome relationship. A lot of work, not a lot of work. Less work, see? And and there's 16 different types. So the weird ones, most likely, are going to be like this. Now, I could go on all night about this, and I'm not going to. What time is it? We're getting late. But one more thought. If you've grown, let's say the ENTJ grew up with an ISFP. Well, they're going to have a good handle, wouldn't they, on an ISFP? There's points for a large family or a large family group or socialization growing up. Why? So you get interactions with all these different people. And just a food for thought. So you've learned how to interact with them. Well, I think that's it. I think showing you that there's these different ease of interaction or difficulty of interaction will lend itself to seeing people like the type that are like the ISFP or they're weird and they're difficult to get along with. Well, if you learn personality, maybe they're going to be less difficult to get along with. Maybe we can break down some of those stereotypes of personality. There's in my family this ENFP here is not. There's a lot of people in my family that love the person Jason Hebner, but they do not love the ENFP type, and it's sad because I really don't believe I can change it. I can modify the behaviors some, but it's sad when people don't understand personality type and they're just like, I don't think NEFI is a good first function to have. Not much you can do about it, but you can stay away, but that doesn't really build relationships. So what do you do? I don't know. I guess you just have to be patient and work with the personality types that are opposed to you, and hopefully get them to see sometime. Maybe they're not going to see you as weird, but as an advantage to them. Each person, here I go. One more point. This guy's got all the blind spots of this one. Don't forget, the weird ones, when it comes to personality, have got your blind spots. And if you can respect them, if respect is possible, they're going to see a lot of the blind spots. So another thing, they might have fewer blinds. Their blind spots are going to be together, but they're going to feel great. Well, I'm going to call it. Okay? If you liked it, please subscribe and give a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comments below. And hopefully you don't run into too many weird ones. And if you do, maybe you can figure out through personality how to deal with them better. All right. Thanks.